U.S. President Donald Trump is weighing in on the unrest in Minnesota on Twitter, and here is his quote: "I can't stand back and watch this happen to a great American city, Minneapolis. A total lack of leadership. Either the very weak radical left mayor Jacob Fry get his act together and bring the city under control, or I will send in the National Guard and get the job done right." And then he added, "These thugs are dishonoring the memory of George Floyd, and I won't let that happen." Mr. Trump went on, "Any difficulty and we will assume control, but when the looting starts, the shooting starts." That's a historical reference, and let's talk about it with our chief media correspondent, Brian Stelter there. Brian, harsh words from this president, and talk about what he had to say and the tone.
Obviously incendiary words from the president, not what you want to hear in a situation like this. It is reminiscent in some ways of Charlottesville, the day of the riots in Charlottesville, when the city was very much still on edge and the president made a bad situation worse. I fear that he is making a bad situation worse right now. I don't claim that the protesters who are in Minneapolis right now are monitoring every word the president says. That's certainly not the case. However, the lack of leadership is going to be a problem in the hours and days to come. We know that cars are still being flipped over. We know that fires are still being set. We know windows are still being shattered here at 2:15 Central Time in Minneapolis. And so a lack of leadership is a real concern. Let me show you, Natalie, what we're seeing from some of the president's political rivals. For example, Simone Sanders, one of Joe Biden's aides and surrogates, saying on Twitter in response to the president, "This is the president of the United States threatening to shoot people in Minneapolis. Vote, please." That's Simone Sanders' message. We're seeing others also condemning the president's rhetoric. And I have to say, though, even though this is disturbing to see from the president, not surprising to see from him, given the playbook that he usually heads toward at a moment like this.
Right, Brian. One recalls when members of a militia went to the Michigan State House upset about the pandemic lockdown, armed to the teeth. We didn't see the same incendiary rhetoric coming
Right
from President Trump on that point. I want to play for you the response from Mayor Fry just about 45 minutes ago to President Trump's tweet.
Donald Trump knows nothing about the strength of Minneapolis. We are strong as hell. Is this a difficult time period? Yes, but you better be damn sure that we're going to get through this.
So there we go. Very angry. When he read the tweet, he hadn't seen it yet during that news conference, and that was his immediate response.
And I think your point about the armed protesters at state houses in several parts of this country are very important. It's very notable, because what have we seen the past few months? We've seen this rhetoric about reopening the country. We've seen these protesters, mostly Trump supporters, showing up at state houses. And now all of this is unfolding as a pandemic still rages throughout the United States and much of the world. One of the reporters from the Star Tribune there in Minneapolis took a photo of a graffiti on the wall near the burning 3rd Precinct. The graffiti says, "Two countries, one virus." And I think that is exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing the collision of one national emergency, the pandemic, and a collision with another national emergency, which is this ongoing issue involving police violence and minority groups in this country who feel they are not safe in their own communities. You see protesters out there wearing masks because of the pandemic, but also because of the threat of tear gas. It is almost it's surreal. It's almost apocalyptic. And I think for folks who are going to wake up and see this, they're not going to recognize necessarily what country this is. It's once again going back to this gaping wound in American society that never quite seems to heal and always comes back to the forefront ever so often.
Right. Gaping wound is right. And it's just, and it's a problem that goes on and on in this country. No one wants to see violence, but people are at a breaking point over this. Brian Stelter for us, live in New York. Brian, as always, appreciate your perspectives. And we begin with breaking news right now in the U.S. state of Minnesota, where angry protests in the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul have escalated into volatile scenes of fires, looting, tear gas, and pepper spray. A police station and numerous other buildings are now in flames. The governor has called in the National Guard to try to restore order. It is a chaotic situation that has been building ever since an African-American man, George Floyd, died Monday in police custody after video showed an officer kneeling on his neck. Protests are also underway in other cities across the United States. President Trump tweeted his disdain for the situation, dismissing the protesters as thugs. And he took a swipe at the Minneapolis mayor, saying he would step in if the city did not get the violence under control. The Minneapolis mayor fired back a short time ago.
Donald Trump knows nothing about the strength of Minneapolis. We are strong as hell. Is this a difficult time period? Yes, but you better be damn sure that we're going to get through this.
One flashpoint behind the unrest is that no charges have yet been filed against the 4 police officers involved in George Floyd's death, although they have been fired. CNN's Josh Campbell has been on the scene all day. Here's his report.
There were a number of protesters that gathered outside this precinct. Precinct 3 is the name, just not far from where the death of George Floyd occurred, which we know was the African-American man who, that dramatic video that we've showed before, showed him on the ground with a police officer with his knee on his neck. He later died. That's obviously been the subject of a robust investigation by local officials as well as the FBI. But it's that incident that has now sparked such outrage here in this community, leading to a number of protesters gathering outside this police station. What started as peaceful then turned into a very confrontational situation where you had protesters outside who were throwing rocks at the police station. We did see a number of police officers on the roof who were returning fire, not with lethal weapons, but with tear gas. We ourselves were gassed at one point and had to move back, but they were trying to push people back from this police station. That continued to escalate through the night as night fell here in Minneapolis into the scene that you saw on your TV there with flames ravaging this building outside and protesters clearly unhappy with the police, clearly taking their frustration and outrage out on the police department. I think it's important to note also that as we've been covering this and been there on the ground, there appear to be different camps. You have people that are just clearly focused on this criminal activity. They're trying to burn down this government building, but we've also seen protesters out there who are nonviolent that have been expressing their outrage at the death of this black man at the hands of the police.
There was more violence in neighboring St. Paul. Our Miguel Marquez was on the scene there. Here's what he saw.
2 more fires have started down University toward the state capitol down there. I don't know if you can see that, but I want to show you what's happening here, where protesters have been challenging police at this fire. Several businesses, including a Napa Auto Parts, are on fire up here. A large group of protesters just came up. It looked like they had been marching perhaps downtown, and they came up, very young protesters as well. They have now moved toward police, not realizing just how liberal they are with the use of mace, tear gas, pepper balls, and flashbang grenades. So I'm guessing that police shortly are going to try to disperse this crowd. This is what we've seen the entire day, with the crowd sort of growing, surging toward the police up here, and then when they deploy some of those non-lethal types of weapons, that then the crowd then shrinks back. And it's really gotten much, much bigger in the last few minutes. It's a little unclear what police are doing. I want to stop over here because this is an area, there's a large number of protesters here. You can see them shooting pepper balls here at those individuals. Jake, step back a second. We have another fire truck coming through here. It's not clear what direction they are headed. They're probably headed down to these, I can see what appears to be 2 different fires about 2 blocks away toward the state capitol from where we are. And I assume that's where that fire truck is headed right now. The protesters on this other side of the street, they have really been challenging the police, and this is where most of the activity has been today. these young protesters who have just showed up, I'm afraid there may be an effort by police to move them back using non-lethal means here very shortly.
It is very rare to see a police precinct set on fire in America. CNN spoke with the Minneapolis fire chief earlier, and he says it is frustrating to watch parts of his city burn.
We got so many great communities in Minneapolis, and to see, the type of communities that have, such a need for groceries, for, a store to buy clothing and buy medications, especially during a pandemic time, and to see these structures that are being destroyed in a community that provides such an important service to, and they have such a need, that it is really extremely disappointing, and it's very frustrating because it's. I would just hope that we can come to a point where some of this level of angst in this destructive action just sort of just stops. I really would like it to stop. I grew up in Minneapolis, longtime resident of Minneapolis, and so you hate to see your city burn, and that's it's really disappointing not only to me, but all my firefighters and all my staff and everybody, all the other residents in the city. It's very disappointing to all of us.
Dozens of people were arrested during demonstrations over Floyd's death in New York City. Authorities said nearly 40 people faced charges ranging from obstruction to criminal possession of a weapon. Several police officers were injured as well, including one who suffered a possible concussion. There were reports of shots fired in Louisville, Kentucky, where outrage over Floyd's death combined with anger over a different shooting, an African-American woman named Breonna Taylor, who was killed in a police raid in March. And there were also demonstrations in other parts of the United States, in Phoenix, Arizona, Denver, Colorado, and Memphis, Tennessee. There's much more ahead here. We'll check in with CNN's Brian Stelter about President Trump's incendiary tweets on the unrest in Minneapolis, taking a direct target at the mayor, and the mayor reacted harshly. Much more ahead on our breaking news right after this.